All right, so we're going to start and we're going to talk about responsive web design using AngularJS. Now, this is a very small part of responsive web design that I'm going to go over, and this is more about trying to address some of the issues that you have when you're building a responsive site. I'm not going to go into CSS media queries and a lot of that detail. This is more about what can you do from an AngularJS perspective, that if you're trying to build a one-size-fits-all site that's going to change its appearance, and that what can you do to make it fast, snappy, and eliminate a lot of the issues that you have by trying to do that. So if you were looking for me to teach you about responsive web design, this is about all I'm going to tell you. It's an approach aimed at crafting sites that basically give you the best viewing experience no matter what device you're on. So if you go to the site, whether you go to it on a desktop, a tablet, or a mobile, you're going to get the best experience for what you're using to view the site with. And it handles resizing, panning, whether you change your orientation. It's actually going to change your display sometimes. And this is right off of Wikipedia. So that's about as far as I'm going to go with that. So how is it usually done? There's two different ways people have tried to tackle this problem. And the first one is what a lot of people will do is, based on what the user agent is coming in, they're going to redirect you to a different subdirectory. They're either going to send you to like a desktop tree, or they're going to send you off to a mobile tree. And this is what Microsoft's MVC, they've actually built that into it so that you can actually say, I want to build a responsive ready MVC app, and it'll generate both a desktop view and a mobile view for you whenever you create a view. The other way is, and the CSS media queries is the second way, and so what they're doing is, based on the screen size, they're going to, like less than 768, they're going to basically change the definitions of the CSS to hide and show different things. They may, and they also change the width of what your columns are. And actually, Bootstrap is probably one of the best examples of how things work in that regard. So let me give you a real quick example on how that works. So I'm going to jump out of here real quick, and I'm going to go over here to Rate a Stogie. So this is a little site that I had worked up a while back, but it's actually built with Bootstrap. And if you watch what happens as I start to move, you're going to start seeing things collapse and things drop down here when I get to a certain size. You'll notice that right about this point here, it goes from three rows across to one row up and down. And so everything is basically here. And if you notice, the menu disappeared. So if I pull it back out, you'll see that the menu will come back up, the navigation pane. So now you've got a drop-down menu type of thing here. So this is actually done all based on the width of the screen that's coming across as a viewport. Now the problem with this is that if you're on a mobile device that has, let's say, a size smaller than 768 pixels, you're still pulling down all the images and all the content for the desktop site, even though it's hidden in the background. So what happens when that mobile device tries to, I guess I should have, I'm right here. So what happens is that that mobile device bogs down trying to manipulate all that hidden CSS or hidden web stuff. Plus, it looks like it's really slow because it's pulling down all these big images over your 3G, 4G network. So that's not really a good solution. And then with redirection, it's more of a maintenance nightmare from a developer perspective, because every time you make a change on the desktop view, you got to make a change on the mobile view, and you got to keep things in sync. And if you don't, then all of a sudden you'll get these weird bug reports. It works fine on the desktop, but when they do it on the mobile site, they're missing an address line, or they're missing a notes field because the developer forgot to update the mobile view or a tablet view. That's one of the things that I didn't like about iPhone development, is their solution for doing the different size screens was to build another resource file for each screen in the early days when they actually brought out the iPad and they had the very first generation of universal apps. You had multiple different screen sizes. So if you changed something on one that was for the iPhone, you had to make sure you went and did it for the iPad. Otherwise, that same data wouldn't show up and your application would bail on you. So we can actually use Angular to help us solve these two problems. One is if we take and go down the CSS media query, then we can use AngularJS to actually hide that data so it never gets pulled down on your smaller devices. Or we can actually use a service for the redirection, and we can actually circumvent and redirect them automatically from the client. So the client can then figure it out instead of your server-side code having to figure it out. We can also use ngIf and ngSwitch to display their appropriate content. But the problem with like ngSwitch or an ngIf is then you get all this complicated code in your HTML. If mobile, do this, or ngSwitch mobile and stuff like that. So that isn't truly a really good way. So what we can do is we can build custom directives to handle whether we hide something because it's on a mobile device or a tablet, or show something, because it's on desktop, and kind of take the same tack that ngSwitch or ngIf and ngSwitch does, so that we don't ever render that content. So it'll go through. It comes down initially, and if you use ngSource so that it doesn't actually, the browser doesn't see a source for an image tag or something like that, you can actually just basically, it comes down with your HTML. You remove all the HTML that's not supposed to be displayed, and then only render what you need and only go to the server to get what you need for your display. So I'm going to kind of go through two different versions. The first one is the redirect by using a service, and we're going to basically feed that into our route configuration. So we're going to basically, at the time we're actually set up our routing, we're going to basically determine, are we a mobile device or a tablet? And then we'll redirect everything appropriately. So let me switch over here to WebStorm. And so this is a start of a library that I have up on GitHub, and the link will be at the end of this, but it's basically called Angular Responsive, and it's a service and 4 directives. And the service basically is all the helper functions, like, am I on a smart device? So in this case here, I look to see if it's a smart device. Is it an Android, an iPhone, a BlackBerry, a Windows Phone? And then that in combination with the screen size, I'm going to come back, this is a mobile device, this is a tablet, or this is a desktop. Now one of the other things I could do is I could also feed in, right now the sizes are hard-coded, but I could provide a block. And I know this is probably hard to see, so let me make it much better for you guys to see here. Let's see here. Oh, come on.
You mean a screen resolution range?
Yeah, screen resolution range. So hopefully you guys can all see that a little bit better. Or should I make it a little bit smaller? Okay. So we start off with a provider, and the reason we're going to use a provider is because we're going to inject this into a config method, and you can't inject a regular service into a config method. You actually have to use the provider pattern so that it actually will get it, because at the point when the config runs, your services are not going to actually be gelled up yet. They're not all going to be created and instantiated. So you use the provider, which what it does, if you get down here at the bottom, is it actually exposes a method called $get. And so what happens, you say provider.get this, and it then at that point will return back your service. So we're going to use that, and that's the main reason we're doing this, is because we're going to inject this into the config section of where we define our routes. So again, what I was saying here is we have just a couple of very basic methods. Is smart device, and what we're doing is we're getting back the user agent from the browser, And then we're checking to see if it's iPhone, iPod, iPad, Silk, Android, BlackBerry, Opera. And then we're going to return back true or false based on that. And then then we have a couple other methods here. Is mobile, is tablet, and is desktop. And so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to check, is this a smart device? And then if it is a smart device and the width is less than 768, then we're going to return back true, and that indicates it's a mobile device. If the width's greater than 768 and it's a smart device, then we're going to say it's a tablet. Otherwise, we're going to just say if it's not a smart device, we're going to consider it to be a desktop. We don't care about the width. And so that way we can then use that in our route config to do stuff. Now, and I'll get into the directives a little bit here when we look at the second project, which actually uses the directives to hide things. So let me go over here and I'll pull up, let's see, this is app 2 that we're going to play with. So this is first of all, if you notice I have, maybe I can make this bigger. He's not going to do it. Let me try this. What is it, control, mouse wheel? Yeah, what? No, he's not going to go any bigger. Anyway, I have a desktop folder and a mobile folder. So here's desktop, and it has a partial 1 and partial 2. And let's make this big again too. I should change I hate this. Come on. So really all I'm doing is desktop view 1, and the other one says desktop view 2. And then the mobile one says mobile view 1. In mobile view 2. So all we're going to do is I want to basically pull between two different views. And yeah, come on. This just doesn't want to work for me today. Here. And then here's actually the config method where we're actually injecting the responsive helper provider, which is what I just showed you before on the previous source code. Although it actually is defined as responsive helper up here, because we're using the provider pattern, it actually AngularJS adorns uppercase provider on the end of it. So you're going to get the provider, and then if you notice here, in the config method, we say $get, and that's actually going to give us back our instance of our service. And so we're going to default to device equals desktop. So we're going to say if it's not a mobile device, we're just always going to default to desktop. But then what we're going to do is we're going to make a call to is mobile, and if it is, we'll change the device to mobile. So right now we're just playing with mobile versus desktop. And then the route, what we did is we just changed the template URL to device plus partial. So that's all we're doing on this. So this is a very simple way to say, okay, I'm going to go send this down this route, or I'm going to send it down that route based on the device. So let me go ahead and I'll bring up, let's see, and where is my web service here? Let's see. Oh, it's probably up here in app. Oh, well, I guess it's a grunt. Let me try grunt.
Jim, I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Would the route provider method only be used for single-page applications mainly? So the guy's not working on those kind of single-page applications, won't be using something like route provider, or does it still use it for navigation?
Okay. Is the route provider being used for? This is actually being used for a single page. You could actually use this for anything, but right now we're just using this to change where we pull the partials up. So when you do /view1, instead of it doing the normal, hard-coded partial one, we're going to say, because it's a mobile device, go to mobile /partial1 and pull that. And I'll actually show you that when we get the app up here. You'll see it. Okay, so I've got it running, so let me switch over here and we'll go to localhost. 8000. And we want to go to app 2. So right now this is desktop 1, and let me bring up the network and we'll refresh it here. You'll see what it's actually what it's requesting right now. Oh. I'm just going to go ahead and, if you notice it, we're going to get our response. We're going to get our helper, and maybe I can actually make this big too. Now, yeah, there we go. He's not going to make it any bigger. But it's going to go through. It wasn't a mobile device, so it skipped over it, and we'll change it. But what I wanted to look at was the network here. If you notice that he actually got the partial 1 off of the desktop is where he went and got it. So now if I go back over here and let's go to sources, and we'll bring up this, and I'm going to emulate Samsung Galaxy S4. And if I refresh this, and what we should see when I do this is it's going to pull that view from mobile now, is where it's pulling the view, is the mobile view. So based on that agent string, he's kicking through there and doing that. Now if I go to view 2 here, so if you notice, it doesn't, on our app, you're not seeing /desktop/view2 or /desktop/view1. It's just /view1 or view2. So as far as the user sees, and when they set a breakpoint and you come back to this breakpoint, and you come back to that breakpoint on a different thing, they're not going to have to resize their screen or anything, because the client's going to say, oh, I'm going here, but it's a mobile device, so I need to mobile/whatever. So this is just a very simple way to kind of handle that. Now the next thing we're going to look at is a couple of directives that are they're just as simple, but they use transclusion, and they actually use a transclusion function. Or did I even go that far? Yeah. So we actually use a function to basically either render the scope or don't render, or render the transcluded scope or not in the function. So let me hide this so we can kind of get to it. And the first thing on this is that you'll notice that I'm not dealing with resizes. When I develop this, it's like when I come to that server or I hit that, I'm either on a mobile device or not. I'm not really switching from a mobile to another device. So what I was like, I'm going to keep this as a simple example. But you could go in and you could basically look for window on resize and handle that as well. You could go back through and redo it. But what we're going to do is I provide back a postlink function. And at this point, whenever the attribute AR mobile changes, we're going to basically remove the child element, destroy it, and set it undefined, because we're going to clean up after ourselves. And then we're going to check and see, is this a mobile device? And if it is, then we're going to create a new scope, and then we're going to basically recreate that element using the transclude method, pass in the child scope and the clone that is actually sent into here. And this is this is a little bit more advanced mojo from directives. Chapter 9 of the book Mastering Web Application Development with AngularJS goes into this in really strong detail, and there's a chapter on the AngularJS directives book that goes into it. But the whole idea is we're holding off rendering the DOM until this point here on line 62. And if it is a mobile device, then we're going to go ahead and we're going to insert that DOM, that child DOM, back into, or we're going to take that element and shove it back into it, compile it and shove it into the DOM so it'll be there. So at this point, because this is and I should show you that we're actually doing a transclude on our directive. So that means that everything that was in it is given to us as what they call a clone. And then we can either stick it in and display it like normal, or we can basically hold off and not display it. And this is the same thing that ng switch and ng if does. And then and the other two directives are pretty much exactly the same. A tablet, we're doing the same thing. We're looking to see when the attribute changes, which means the first time in the link we're going to get called. So we'll at least do this once. But if we do have a child element, we'll get rid of it and we'll clean it up, and then we're going to check to see, is this a tablet device? If it is, then let's go ahead and take that clone, recompile it, and shove it back into the DOM. And then we're just going to stick it right after the element, which is what we're doing here. And then with desktop, we're saying, okay, if it's a desktop, do the same thing. So, I mean, this is really repetitive. But what we're doing is we're using a different directive instead of trying to, and we'll get to another one here where we're actually, it's a multi, so like I want it to be on tablets and mobile devices, then let's go ahead and do it. So I'm just trying to kind of keep it simple. And I don't know if any of you guys have seen my examples before, but I always do very, very simple stuff that shows it. You can build on this, make it more complex as you want. But this other one it's just AR responsive. So this one here, you actually pass in an array of device types. And then what we're going to do is we're going to check and see if this is a mobile, if you have mobile in that array of device types, we're actually passing in an object. If mobile is true and we haven't shown the element, we'll basically call is mobile, and that'll set our flag. If tablet is true and we haven't shown the element yet, we'll check to see if it's a tablet, and if so, we'll set our flag. Otherwise desktop, and then when we get down here, if we should show the element, then we basically shove it back into the DOM. And let me show you the code for this. Let me go to app1 index here. So, and then I'll make it, see if I can do this nice and big. So you see here, this is basically going to be visible. This whole div here is only going to be visible on a mobile device, which is smart device, less than 768 pixels wide. So what will happen is when this runs, this will actually be gone. It just is never going to show up. And we'll look at we can look at the HTML. On the tablet, if we're on a tablet, then this will, if we're not on a tablet, then this will be gone. All you'll get is just it'll just say data AR-tablet. And it'll look like a comment. And then on the desktop, I just noticed I pulled that out of here, so let me put this back where it belongs. There we go. Desktop, and then the last one here is the responsive one, where we're passing in an object to tell it whether we want it displayed on mobile or a tablet device. And in this case, we don't want it displayed on the desktop. So let me go ahead and I'll flip around. We'll go to app 1 and we'll show this guy in action. So we get basically, right now it's a desktop device. So if I go in and I bring this up, and let's go ahead and we'll emulate this and we'll refresh it. Now I get two different things, only shown on mobile device and tablet. So if I actually now change this to, let's put this as a Nexus 10. I'll emulate that, and then we'll refresh it. You'll notice that the other one's now the section that says only shown on, and I'm sorry guys, you can't see this very well. It's, even though we actually have it, oh, well, once I did that, now it goes away. But it's basically playing with it. And if you guys go out on GitHub and pull this down, you can play with it all you want. See, now it's going to go back to desktop devices. But again, so let's also look at the code here. So let me go over here to Elements and get down here where we've actually got this. And now maybe I can make this bigger. No. But if you notice here, like you see the comment down here at the bottom. It's very hard to see, but it says AR mobile. So that div that I had for the mobile device, it just basically didn't get redrawn. Same thing with the tablet. And then with the desktop, we actually have something down here. And then the responsive, there's nothing. Because we transcluded it, what happens is until we actually update the DOM for that transcluded piece of code, it just basically puts a marker in there for where your directive was. And so in this case here, nothing's going to come down. We're only going to pull down the stuff for the desktop. And if we actually go over here and look at the network, and let me refresh this again, you'll notice that we pulled down 2 images here. Now if we go back and I change this back to desktop, come on, let's reset that. You'll notice that now that only 1 image came down. So using the ng source inside that kept us from pulling down those images. Now if I change those to source elements, we'd always pull down the images, because as soon as the browser gets the HTML and parses it, he starts sending off calling stuff. So if we use like ng source, the browser doesn't know what to do with that, so it leaves it alone. And so that way you're not running out to get data images. So that's pretty much it for what I was going to show you around responsive. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
2 questions.
Okay.
First method, really simple and elegant. Do you not end up, though, with the same problem that you would have with switching back and forth between 2 sites, where you really have to make sure that you keep your pages?
Yes. So with the first one where we're changing the view, you do have the problem that you have with the redirect, which is you're still going to manage 2 different sets of partials, one for mobile and the other one for desktop. And actually it's as many sets of partials for that view, as many devices as you want to maintain, because you may want to do, if you think about if you do an iOS app today, a universal one, not only do you have the 4G, or I mean the 4S image size, but you also have the 5S, the extended one, and then you've got the Retina iPad, the iPad mini sizes. So you end up having to have 7 or 8 different sizes, to make something look as good as possible.
Right, but so yeah, you do have the problem, but at least they're pretty much in the same, not hard. And then the second one, it looks like that actually helps, using the directive, kind of helps solve it by putting everything in one page, even though it's in different chunks.
Right. No, that actually is what a lot of people are doing now. A lot of people, and the big thing on the front end side and the web design is, let's use one piece of HTML for all your sites. Use CSS the way it was intended for. Use CSS media queries and change your CSS on the fly based on the device. So what you're really maintaining then at that point is your CSS changes based on the device, but you still have total control over what you're doing. The width of your fields, how big your columns are, and everything. So you can actually do a very nice thing. And the good thing about it is that on the fly, you're only maintaining one partial for that site instead of 2 or 3 different partials. Any other questions?
I do have a comment that I think that single approach is better, that you have everything on the same place and not keeping multiple versions of it. It's because what it's saying that we do white label, so we know that it shoots very well. But you can also do the same thing here with ngIf, and still having a service that evaluates just once instead of every single time, which the directive will do.
Yeah. So.
Once, if it's a mobile, if it's an iPad, or whatever it is, and then with ngIf, what ngIf will do is, after the DOM has been rendered, it will remove that element from the DOM and then reapply it again only if the condition applies. That is exactly the same benefit.
So the comment is, instead of executing this every time, your service basically does this once, stores it off, and then when you're in your code, let's say, or even in the, let's go back to this here. At this point, instead of doing this, we already know what our type is the whole time. And that would happen for all your ngIf items. So we could go back over here. Let's say, I think this is the one. So we could do we could say here ngIf, and then you could do
Whatever variable you have stored in that,
yeah.
like is mobile or whatever.
And
Work the same.
yeah, the reason I didn't do this is because when you get into what happens here now is there are all sorts of different combinations, right? Usually, and so you get into some of these where all I really want is mobile, or all I really want is this to be visible on a tablet. And if I'm doing ngIf this, ngIf that, it just becomes, it clutters up this. You know, I always think it's more elegant if I can create a directive that hides all that logic. But to me, I think your idea of instead of doing this all once, maybe what we do is when the provider's called the first time, is we already come up with all this stuff and store it so that we cut down on the back-end code, which is another way to do it. So it calculates it once, and then anytime they say is mobile or whatever, it's there. You know, it's more like accessing a property instead of a method. But again, there's 100 different ways to skin the cat. So his idea it works just as good as what I'm doing. Yes.
I'm a big fan of putting down server-side code whenever possible, but there is a different concept of separation of responsibilities. I'm a big fan if you're doing mobile development. Don't send the client anything it doesn't need. So for something like switching between sites, I would probably say, depending on what technology you're using, have the server only render the HTML components that particular device needs, and then send those. And then if you're using a LESS or a SAS compiler, take those parameters in and only send the CSS that you need. And then you're not annihilating the battery or the data on the mobile device, and you can actually have your server do what it's made to do.
Right. So that comment is only render what you need to show for the device. So that's all server side instead of client side. It cuts down. It basically also addresses the other thing, whereas you're not basically sending down stuff you don't need. And I'm trying. Well, and I've been dealing with that a little bit too. Now with like what I was talking about earlier on one of the things we're doing, where we're actually the menu options, we're parsing that on the fly. So the first time you hit that site and you log in, your menu takes a little while to display because it has to go through and parse it based on all your roles. But then you only get what you have access to, right? And it's cached at that point. And I think you could probably do the same thing on the server. Is you're gonna hit it one time, right, on the server to generate that on that view. And if you cache that view at that point, you can keep your performance can stay high so that you're not generating it on the fly every time. Is where I've seen that, because we tried to do that with some old ASP.NET applications that we had written, and we always ran into problems with it, mainly because ASP.NET destroys the page, and you're redrawing it every time. Now, there's other ways to do it nowadays, but that's another good way of actually attacking the problem. Yes.
You could even combine them just because you've got you're doing this calculation here. You could essentially go ahead and pull down resources based on the type of device that it is with an AJAX pull. So you really could even limit the stuff that's coming down based on the choices that you made in your directives.
Yes. Yeah, and like I said, this is just to get you guys into it, but it's some other ideas that you guys you can actually use as a Kickstarter, and it seems like we've got a lot of people here that have actually had to tackle this in one way or another.
This right here would be really good. I'm just kind of thinking what I might use it for. If you have different versions of the iPad, all the browsers work differently in certain ways. So if you have basically dynamic view selection based on which tablet you have,
Yeah.
or what their user properties are, that would be really powerful there.
Yeah, I know, because we ran into that. How many different flavors of an iPad can they make? But you're right. I mean, well, and that's actually another good thing is if you get the user agent string, you could use this, and instead of using it for mobile or whatever, you could use it for, it's Android, and so I want to take advantage of Android over iPod or iPad or Windows Mobile. So I mean, this, you could use it for that way too, so that you can custom tailor the experience for the device. You know, so that's another a good way to address it. We actually use this. I was using the is smart device function just so I could figure out if it was an older Android device on our site, because it actually handled the language differently. So that was the first time I ever came up with the, started working on the is smart. And this is actually based on Detect mobile browsers, but it's a much cheaper way of doing it than what they did. Any other comments? Questions? All right, well, we're going to go ahead and I'm going to stop recording and